Do you remember that classic Nokia ringtone? Or maybe remember a time when phones were basically indestructible, and one name was on almost every single one of them. And nope, it wasn't Apple, it wasn't Samsung, it was Nokia. They were absolutely untouchable. And then, in just a few short years, poof, they vanished from the top.
It's honestly one of the most mind-blowing stories in the history of business. How did the undisputed king of mobile phones lose its crown, its kingdom, and pretty much everything it had built?
Okay, to really get how big this fall was, you first have to understand just how high they climbed. Look at this. In 2007, Nokia controlled over half of the entire global mobile market. Think about that. That means 1 out of every 2 phones on the planet was a Nokia. They didn't just seem invincible, they were the market. So how did they get there? Well, this empire, it wasn't built overnight. To really wrap our heads around this story, we got to go back to the beginning to see how this Finnish company rose up to dominate the entire world. And you know what's so wild about Nokia? They didn't even start in tech. Not at all. The company began as a simple paper mill way back in 1865. For over 100 years, it went through different phases, rubber, cables, until the 1990s when it made a massive all-in-bed on mobile phones. And wow, did that bet pay off. By 1998, they'd blown past Motorola to become the #1 phone brand in the world. Their slogan wasn't just some slick marketing line. It was their whole mission, connecting people. And they really, truly did it. They brought mobile phones to the masses, from the biggest cities to the most remote villages on Earth. For a solid decade, Nokia wasn't just a company. It was a global cultural phenomenon. But you know how these stories go. While Nokia was enjoying its reign at the top, a storm was brewing over in Silicon Valley. A moment was coming that was about to change everything, not just for Nokia, but for all of us. In 2007, Steve Jobs stood on a stage and said these now famous words. Of course, he wasn't talking about 3 different products. He was introducing one device that did it all, the iPhone. It wasn't just another phone. It was a powerful computer that fit right in your pocket, and it completely redefined what a phone could and should be. And right here, this was the fork in the road for the whole industry. You had 2 visions of the future. Nokia, they doubled down on what they knew. Physical keyboards and their old, kind of clunky Symbian operating system. Apple, on the other hand, bet on something completely different. A seamless touchscreen, a beautifully simple OS, and this revolutionary new thing called the App Store. So, what was Nokia's reaction to all this? They didn't see a threat. In fact, they laughed. I mean, their executives publicly dismissed the iPhone. They were totally convinced that people would always prefer physical buttons. They just completely missed the point that the game wasn't about hardware anymore. It was all about software and the user experience. And that one single miscalculation, it proved to be absolutely fatal. What happened next wasn't a slow, graceful decline. It was a shocking, unbelievable, and incredibly rapid collapse. The empire just crumbled. I mean, just look at these numbers. They're staggering. From that peak of 50% market share in 2007, Nokia plummeted to a tiny 3% just 5 years later. 5 years. In the business world, fall that fast, that complete, for a company that was on top, it's almost unheard of. The king had been dethroned. And then came the end. In 2013, what was left of Nokia's once mighty phone division got sold off to Microsoft for just over $7 billion. It was basically a fire sale, the final sad admission that the game was over. But you know, maybe nothing captures the sheer tragedy of it all more than this quote from Nokia's CEO at the time, Stephen Elop. In a tearful address to his employees, he said this: "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." That statement just perfectly sums up the disbelief inside a company that just couldn't understand how it had fallen so far, so fast. So what really went wrong? Was it just the iPhone? Well, the answer is way more complicated than that. The real story here isn't just about Apple winning. It's about what was happening inside Nokia. And the lessons? Well, they are crucial for any company in any industry. It really all boils down to 3 fatal mistakes. First, complacency. Being #1 made them slow and arrogant. They forgot that technology never, ever stands still. Second, you had leadership paralysis. They saw what was coming, but they were trapped by their own success, too scared to take risks that might hurt their existing products. And third, a broken culture. The very engineers who could have saved them were ignored, their innovative ideas buried under layers of managers who were just stuck in the past. So, when you get right down to it, the iPhone was just the catalyst. It wasn't the cause of death. The fatal wounds here were self-inflicted. Nokia's own internal failures, its inability to adapt, and its refusal to embrace the future, that's what truly brought the giant down. So what happened to Nokia? Well, the Nokia phone brand is technically still around, but it's really just a shadow of what it once was. The core company, though, successfully pivoted into telecommunications and network equipment. But for millions of us, that name will always be a powerful memory of our first phone, a little reminder of a time when tech felt simpler and phones were, famously, built to last. Nokia's story is so much more than a business case study, right? It's a timeless warning that no empire, no matter how big, is immune to collapse. And it leaves us with one critical question. In our world of constant, rapid change, where innovation never, ever sleeps, who's next?